I think you win the background award.
Yeah.
That was my goal.
How
It's real. It's
um,
physical.
This is Mike Dow.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm glad you got to make it. Should we start from the beginning? Do you remember the first time you had the music fill your soul?
I do.
Mike's on Mike's. Yeah.
Do you guys remember the Switched On Classics records from the early 80s?
Yes.
Yes.
When classical music with drum machines, I said, I like these tunes. I don't know what that chicka 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 is, but I like it. And then when I was 10, a man came to my school. He was a friend of my sister's. No, he was a friend of his daughter was a friend of my sister's. So he was a friend of my sister's dad. He had a memory moog and a Prophet 5 on stage. And we got
What?
I was 10 and we got a full demo of that. And I was just like, okay, my entire world has changed right now and I'm all the better for it. So I said, synthesizers are the greatest thing of all time and I love them. And that's how my life will be completely different from now on. So from that point on, I was like, I'm getting a synthesizer. I'm going to be famous with it. And 5 years later, I got my first one. But I was, the scene was set in 1984.
Sure. Talk about your first synthesizer.
Okay, well, so I told my parents I wanted a synth, and they said, "How about this home organ?" And to turn on the home organ, I was like, "Well, I can press keys, and it makes sounds, but like the drum beats were like foxtrot and bossa nova and everything." And then it ended up getting destroyed at the party. So I got a Korg M1 in 1989, and it was pretty exciting because now I could do everything I wanted to do, or I thought I wanted to do, on one keyboard. And from the outset, the Korg M1 could do it. It could do the pianos, it could do the bass, it could do the drums. It could had a sequencer built into it. I quickly learned the sequencer was not going to work for what I wanted to do at all because A, it was like you had to like edit on this teeny little screen, and B, it had a very strict note limit, and you really couldn't do a lot with the sequencer. But when you plug that into an IBM PC running Cakewalk in DOS, all the magic was there for you. And so that was my only synth for a long time. Um, but it was so weird because, I didn't have any resources I do now. So I didn't know why it didn't sound like old Depeche Mode records because I'm like, they're using synths. I'm using a synth. Why doesn't it sound like an ARP 2600? Why my drums don't sound like an ARP 2600 bass drum? What's the deal with this? Gradually, I learned that they're using analog stuff. I was using digital stuff. And I tried to make it sound as analog as possible. But again, that wouldn't come till years later.
Well, let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit. So, years later, whenever you decided to do the analog stuff, what was the first kind of analog piece of synth that you got, and you were like, "Oh, here it is."
Well, again, this shows my naivety about most things synthesizer related. We had some friends loan us a Jupiter 8 in the 90s, and we thought it was a piece of junk because it didn't have MIDI on it, didn't have a really good LCD screen. We were like, this thing is so old and so gross. Of course, now I revere it for what it is, which is an amazing synth. But my first analog synth was a microKORG. And I looked at it, I said, it's got wood panels, it's got knobs, it's got a really simple display, it's got a vocoder. This must be analog. Didn't know that it was actually a fully digital synth, a fully VA synth. But that was where I started getting the really big chunky bass lines, the really nice little sequence sounds, great pad sounds. I mean, everything on that keyboard gets a lot of guff, but it's a really nice little synth. And everything it does well. There's a whole lot more to the audio world than that, but if you're a beginner or just somebody that wants to get those bread and butter synth sounds, it's great. And that started building my setup to what it is now, which is a little bit of everything. So I have about 30 synths now. I have real analog, virtual analog. I have wavetable, samples, drum machines. I have all the stuff. But that was my kind of my gateway drug into all that new stuff. But I don't think I would have been able to get into it and appreciate it as much had I not been doing it when I was like 14, 15 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
Remind me how we know each other.
Okay, so There is a man who in the 80s and 90s sold synthesizers to every Depeche Mode, Front 242, Duran Duran wannabe in Dallas, and his name was Tommy Mack. He's still alive. He doesn't sell synths anymore, but he's still alive. So pretty much anybody that wanted to buy a synth would either go see him when he worked at Guitar Center or when he worked at Brooke May's Pro Shop. He had, and I can send you a picture, of course, but like he had big, wiry blonde hair and always wore like, he'd go to work wearing like, you know, ladies, you know, flowy pants and like boots up to his ankles and like those little stupid jackets that like buttoned up at your above your belly button with like shimmery stuff on there and everything. And he would and he'd be over there selling cables and DX7s like he was, adamant
Like
or something like
seagulls.
that. Yeah, absolutely. And so this guy was kind of the guru, and I kind of learned everything I knew at the time about music and music production from this guy because he was in the trenches and he knew it. So I'd be like, what kind of drum machine is this? What kind of this is that? What kind of this is that? And he kind of broke it all down to me in a very condescending way, by the way. But as a result, everything that most people knew was he was involved, and he threw these great New Year's Eve parties where he would just have all these other Dallas electronic musicians over, and he would like have props and like naked mannequins, glowy lights, smoke, all that kind of stuff, which is like, compared to what my high school parties were, which is like my parents aren't home, I've got beer, to like this is a whole event. This is something very exciting. And you and I have a friend in common, Mike, named Brian Mitchell.
Yep.
And Brian Mitchell had a really cool haircut, and he had this kind of stoic, kind of like serious face all the time and everything. We just started talking about electronic music because I think always my mind was on. I think we were talking about the production of. We were talking about the bass line, and he and I just started getting in the weeds about stuff and realized that we were kind of soulmates. And then he and I started talking on the phone, and back then that's what you would do is you would just talk on the phone for 2 hours with somebody because there was no other distractions, so we would just talk about Pet Shop Boys and music production. I'm in this band, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I've got this friend Mike, and then I'm doing this, I'm doing that, we're getting ready to do this, we're getting ready to do that, I've got this friend Mike, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and I'm working on this, I'm working on that, I've got this sequencer, got to meet my friend Mike. So Brian I was trying to get Brian kind of, because I thought that if he was in my band, we'd be cool because he had that face and he could just stand there with a synthesizer and just stand there stoic and be like a Vince Clarke or Chris Lowe and just be there. So I could maintain my buffoonery and no one would be like, hey, he's not playing the instrument at all. What's going on with this picture? So Brian, I was trying to recruit for that. And eventually Brian subbed in for me. He replaced me for a gig, like our first big kind of show that was exciting and everything. So Brian subbed in for me, and it was very cool, and we were very happy to have him. And then we kind of worked him in, and for up until Surge kind of got going, for like 2 years, he was our third guy on stage and everything, and he'd also helped us out with remixes and stuff like that. So by that point, he brought you into the fold, and you were helping do remixing with us. Did you ever join us on stage? I don't think you ever did. Like
No.
not like no, but I mean, but yeah, no. Actually, you guys opened up for us once. You played
and
Austin
Denton or
College.
Sherman or yeah.
Yeah, and you guys did. I know you guys did a cover of Shell Shock, not Shell Shock, but like a Subculture by New Order. And I know you guys did some other stuff, but I do remember that's the only time I think we've been on a stage together up until that point.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
My memory is not what it used to be, but it's pretty good.
I want to backtrack to the condescending sales guy.
Yes.
What is Mike Nemec's right across the street from the Taco Casa up there in the HEB area? Used to be a place called Players Music, and they sold lots of things, mainly guitars. But every time you walked in there, and of course, you're younger, you're like a teenager or when you're 12, 13, 15, whatever. You walk
He's
in
still
there,
12, 13, 15, whatever. Look at him.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. You feel that way anyway. And you walk in there and it's just this attitude of like, you're like, hey, can you help me? And the
Get out of here, kid.
attitude
You
was
can't
always
afford this.
sort of like, your first problem is you're an asshole for coming into my store, it's like that. And I think that's I think we've all experienced the condescending salesperson, and you're like, I just want to make music, and I know this stuff is awesome, and just tell me the awesomeness. And they're like, nah, you kind of suck. Leave.
Yeah, a little side anecdote on that. We would always Guitar Center was a little opposite because they'd come up and be like, whatever you were looking at, they're like, "Oh, this thing's awesome," and you're just going, "Okay, whatever, dude." So we would
I'll
always
make
mess
you a
with
smoke a
the
deal on it. Let me go talk
with
to
the
my
guy
manager.
in pro audio or keyboards. We'd look at something and we'd be like, he'd be like just ripping off stuff we didn't ask about, like, this is a 16-bit, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and we go, does it have LRF support? And the guy's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, all the latest stuff, it's, this and that.
And you just
And
made
that was
shit
our
up.
code for idiots
Yeah.
because LRF means little rubber feet. And we would be looking at the back of the keyboard, lifting it up, going, I don't think it has LRF support. And the guy's like, oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And I'm like, I don't see it, And we would do that to screw with guys. And then they'd be like, well, let me go talk to my manager. He probably knows.
I didn't mean
Well,
to ruin your flow. I just wanted to,
no, it's fine. It's fine. But in my opinion, the only reason to work at a music store is to get the gear you want at wholesale or cheaper, and then move on to something else and work on your music career. And Tommy really was working on his music career. He was in a bunch of bands. He led his own band, but he was a side guy in a bunch of bands and everything. And very talented guy, very smart, very savvy producer. But again, everybody kind of flowed in his little universe, and everybody kind of knew each other through that. And this was before the internet, so it's like, oh well, how do you know this guy? Well, I know him because I sold him this and sold him that and everything. But Tommy he was a really good resource. I mean, he was really helpful, and because we were really dumb. I mean, we really didn't know a sampler we didn't know why a keyboard with speakers on it was a bad keyboard for a pro. We didn't know any of those things. So I mean, he was very helpful. Later on, he got a little bit, kind of, I would say, nefarious in his ways. But he's just that kind of guy, and it's okay. But yeah, people that work at music stores forever, unless they have some ownership thing or something like that, or really like that business, I mean, they're just gonna be, whatever. They're gonna just be miserable, and just like I would be miserable working in a music store. I never worked in a music store, a record store, a movie theater because I love movies, I love music, and I love all those things. I wouldn't want to hate it.
Right.
It's like so. But again, he opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I made a lot of contacts through him. And I was kind of, at 18, 19 years old, I kind of knew a lot of the heavy hitters that were making music that was getting played on the radio in Dallas, kind of through his tutelage, which was kind of nice. So, again, not mad about it. It was a long time ago. Some things were said that weren't cool, but that was all in the past, and we're all better people.
So regarding your band history, you were playing an instrument in junior high or high school, because I knew you were in Division of Beat.
Right.
Were there bands before that? And if so, what were you like? What was your first kind of, hey, this guy's going to play this, we're going to do this, and we're in a band?
Okay. So I played trombone in junior high, and I wasn't very good at it. I got to first chair one time because no one else showed up. That's kind of, but I mean, I also didn't like, I liked playing music, but I found that whole, I mean, I can appreciate live band and symphonic music. I just don't like me having to be part of it. So I wasn't really on time, and I wasn't really on pitch, and I used to irritate the heck out of the director, because again, I decided 2 years earlier that why would anybody be making music with, wood and metal pipes when there's all this great stuff you can have with a synthesizer? But of course, I mean, it was an elective. I kind of went along with it and everything. But I got my first synth in '89. I was in my first band like a week after that. Because again, when you're 14, 15 in 1989 and you've got a $2,000 synth, you become very popular with people that don't have $2,000 synths.
Yeah, you might as well own a Lamborghini at that point.
Right, because even though you can't play it, you still got one. You can still be in the band. So
That's right. You own the football.
So there was a band called the Albino Gypsy Hubcap Thieves. The Albino Gypsy Hubcap Thieves, which is pretty specific, a little bit problematic, because it's kind of like it's
Only if you get caught.
Again, it wasn't my name for the band. There's a whole website there. The lead singer has made his own website for that. If you want to look it up, it's out there on the internet. But
But
basically, it was
this
this.
band still exists?
No. But he's really into documenting the past.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's got a website. He's got a website for all the bands he's been in, including that one, which is
I'll check
odd.
it out.
Yeah, it's. I'll send you the link. I think it's on one of our Facebook posts. Anyway, so there was this band, and it was this guy named Cleve who looked really cool. Like he was tall, had this curly blonde hair, these striking blue eyes. And I was like, man, this guy, again, I was in Tommy Mac world. This guy looks awesome. I mean, he's got to be in a band. And so he would sing these songs, and the songs weren't bad. I mean, they were just your normal high school depressive, one for the heartache, two for the pain, three for the love you kill, that kind of stuff and everything. But the guy playing keyboards was playing like this $25 Yamaha keyboard that you get at a pawn shop. And it had built-in speakers, but he was using the arpeggiator and the sequencer, and he would be building drum loops in real time, and he would be programming the bass in real time, and basically doing this whole song, sequencing the song live while this guy sang. And I was like, and he also had cool hair, and he wore dark glasses, and he wore a trench coat, and it looked awesome. And my first job for them was to operate the fog machine at their show, which I was overly enthusiastic about it then. It was too much fog, and I set the fire alarm off. I've done that more than once. But anyway, but it was so exciting to be in this band. Um, and then like literally the guy the next week said, I have to go. My parents won't let me be in this band anymore. I have to study. I'm going to be a pharmacist. At 15, he told us this. So he's like, so he couldn't be in our band anymore. So we were the Albino Just Kept Thieves, and we had this synth that we didn't know how to use, but it sure made cool sounds. And we just had to kind of start figuring out what our music was. So then Cleve, the other guy in the band, got rid of that cheesy Yamaha keyboard that neither of us knew how to program, but the other guy could do it really well. And he bought a Roland S50 sampler. So once you get a sampler when you're 14, you're sampling sex ed videos and military, speeches,
Documentaries.
and you're just and you're playing it, and you're just being cool, and you're putting it over drum beats. You will serve us. You will serve us. Whatever. I mean, and he made a couple songs like that. And our band was called Isotron, and so an Isotron, just for whoever cares, is apparently a part in a refrigerator that keeps everything cold. But we were like, what a cool name for a band. It has ISO and Tron in it. That sounds very electronic and very cool. So we introduced everybody. This was like 1990. So everybody met. We're like, we're in a band called Isotron. And they're like, what does that mean? Oh, it's a part from a refrigerator. Oh, you guys, the refrigerator boys. So we were, so in the whole Dallas industrial community, we were like the refrigerator boys. Oh, those guys, which is ridiculous or whatever. We even met Trent Reznor, and he signed a picture. He's like, hey, Isotron, aka the refrigerator boys. So we were like,
That's awesome.
man, if we could get Nine Inch Nails excited about our band, which he really wasn't, then we're off to the races. And then like I really got tired of that band because we weren't getting any gigs. I really wanted to be a songwriter. And there were just a lot. I mean, it's just you're a teenager. There's jealousy, there's anger, there's like I'm talented, you're not, that kind of thing. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go do my own thing. And so I started my own fake band called Gum Crissis, which is named after a Japanese anime. And like I had written some songs myself, sequenced them in Cakewalk, and I had one of those little Tascam 424 recorders, which was awesome. And I just started making my own little songs, and they were terrible. I mean, like one of the songs was called Baby Snakes, and it was about the different, like, I was at school one day and I saw all these like AC coils sticking out of the window. I was like, those are like baby snakes. So I wrote a whole song about it. Not good at all. But I wrote a bunch of just really sad songs, and I made a cassette out of it and everything. It sounded terrible. I didn't know how to engineer or anything like that. And of course, the way the M1 worked was you couldn't do individual effects channels. So if you had reverb on your bass, which you shouldn't, if you had reverb on your piano, which you shouldn't, you're gonna have reverb on your kick drums. Everything was just like, again, it wasn't good. But this was like towards the end of 1990, and I was like, man, this isn't working out for me either. And so then Cleve approached me, the same guy from from both Alberta Thieves and Isotron and said, well, let's try another band. And I said, are you going to be a dick this time? And he's like, I promise not to be a dick. I'm like, okay. And again, you're young. You believe people when they tell you these things. So you're like, okay, he's not going to be a dick. We'll start a new band. And we were at school, and this is cheesy as heck, but I mean, Mike knows the story, but we found a little film strip on the ground that said Division of Beat Set 1. And it was white Helvetica on blue. Now, blue is my favorite color, and Helvetica is my favorite font. And the fact that it said Division of Beat was a sign. We didn't know Division of Beat was a book. We didn't know anything about that. We were just like, what a cool name for a band. And so I said, I don't want to do this sample crap. I want to actually write songs. Oh man, I want to write songs too. So we started that process and everything. And that was our band for 6 years.
And that's
Cool.
the one you did gigs with. That's when
Yep.
Brian met you and I met
Yep.
you and Cleve and we were doing remixes and all that stuff.
That was
I mean, you were pressing vinyl.
We were pressing vinyl. We were on the radio. We were doing everything a 90s synth pop band should have been doing, except getting rich and famous, which didn't happen for a myriad of reasons.
Because you weren't British.
And we were doing it in 1994 versus
Yeah,
1984.
You were 10 years late.
Or 10 years too early.
Yeah.
If you
one of the two.
look at all the synthwave stuff that's coming out now, we were way early for that.
And then DOB ended somehow. If there's a cool story of how it ended, great. If not,
I mean, I can kind of tell it to you. I mean, you saw the upswing. You saw us going from, futzing around in the bedroom to playing, for 300 people at Lizard Lounge, and then going on to playing for like 4,000 people, getting radio gigs, getting our song in rotation, getting invited to go to, South Texas and do these big shows. And then a year later, we were driving out to Palestine, Texas for a non-paid show in like a little park picnic area. I'm like, we weren't like, everything kind of deteriorated. And again, I really wasn't I was a co-songwriter, but I wasn't, and I would come up with lyrics and riffs and stuff like that, but I wasn't involved in the arrangement because again, it goes back to everybody around you is saying, this other guy's the talent. You shut up and you're a sideman and you stay along for the ride. Because every time because Robbie Wabi Sabi's been a thing for years. Like Robbie Wabi Sabi was there that first show in 1990 when I got a little bit too excited when I'm running these drum loops through a 486. I start just riffing and jamming and enjoying like Cleve's like, dude, shut up. Calm down. This is my show. What are you doing? This is not part of the thing. I'm like, I'm having a great time. The audience loves it. But Robbie Wabi Sabi was always there. He was always the guy that was singing and dancing and making funky moves in the audience. And I was always told to shut up. I'm a sideman. Don't do any of that stuff. You're just there to make me look cool, et cetera, et cetera. And again, when everyone around you is telling you that that other guy's the talent and that you're not the talent, you start to believe it, And at some point you're like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. So on this next record we're going to do, I'm going to have barely any input on it. There's going to be reverb on every channel, including the kick and the bass. We're going to use only cheesy Roland orchestral samples. There's not going to be any low end at all. And you can't say anything about it because this other guy is right. And eventually, like I said, the opportunities kept falling apart. And then our manager got sick. And so he passed away. And so that was kind of it was kind of over before that, but it's just like at some point, there's only so far you can go. And the initial excitement that we had getting into the industry wasn't happening for us anymore. And we weren't able to push above that ceiling. We weren't grunge. We weren't indie. We weren't, we weren't techno. So no one really knew where to put us. And as a result, we ran out of money and we ran out of whatever. And I was like, I'd rather go do something else. So I always had music in the back of my mind and I always wanted to get back to doing it, but that particular project wasn't going to work. And I also didn't know what my next project was going to be. So it wasn't a spectacular story. It was just kind of like things kind of fizzled and they kind of just, I became less and less involved. And then I was just kind of like, we really can't do this. And we tried to reboot it a couple times, but it was never anything great. And We even came down to College Station one time to try to get you and Brian to do a backing track for us, and it didn't work either. It just no one was that interested in it, and there wasn't any money coming into it, so it kind of like went by the wayside. But a lot of bands are like that, and it sucks, but it's just that's how things go.
Yeah. Well, it all leads to something else eventually. I do want to get into Robbie Wabi Sabi at some point, but
Please,
there's kind of the DOB end. You got married, started a family,
like you do,
like you do, and then um, the reconnection I had with you was more in the film world.
100%.
And so what I know that you were into movies. I guess I didn't realize it until we connected on that. But do you remember what was going on when you're like, you know what, screw this, I'm gonna start making films?
Well, what I kind of wanted to do was because I don't know, because you and Brian were kind of doing the whole kind of rave techno thing at that point, like the late 90s. Am I right? You guys were doing some, and you were booking some big shows in College Station, like you were putting together some big PAs and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken, more or
Yeah, it was
less.
more of like the Houston and Austin
Okay.
rave DJ scene.
Yeah.
Just briefly, we got hooked up in College Station with a guy who did a radio show there that was kind of the local flavor of
Yeah.
Edge Club. But
Hmm.
he, and that's where Brian got into DJing was, got some MK 1200s and this and that. But then we said, well, we can do live PAs. So that's how we got into that. And then it turned into more of like, oh, if you're doing a live PA, it's all got to be, up hardcore. Here's your 40-minute set, go.
Yeah.
So that's that, and then that's kind of how we got into that. Even though we would have, when we wrote songs, they weren't necessarily all like that.
Right.
But if we were playing a show, it was songs that were specifically for that or remixes of
Sure.
kind of downtime stuff.
Yeah.
But I was always kind of a film nerd.
Me too.
And in college, I started doing uh short films.
Right.
So I think that's about the same time. But I don't
So
really remember
yeah,
specifically how it was like, hey, Robbie, hey, Mike, I'm doing a film.
I don't know how it went either. I just remember how so kind of when I got out of DOB, I started getting serious with my kid's mom, and she she didn't like to be at the house with her mom that much. So we went to the movies like 2 or 3 times a week, which is insane, but I still do it. But I mean, we used to go to the movies all the time, and I started becoming fascinated with what the composition of it was. So I mean, it's not only just the writing and directing, there's also the production design, the sound, the editing, the visual effects, all that kind of stuff is amazing. So I'm like, I should get into this. And then I realized that if I found out about Super 8, and I was like, if I get this little short roll of film, I can make a film, and I can start making like little commercials and stuff like that. And so I was disciplining myself on film before I ever did anything on video. And so I started making these little short films on video. And I think you're the piece you did that got into all those festivals. You were doing that around 2000, 2001. Is that right? Or 1999?
I think it was the late 90s.
Yeah.
99 sounds like a good year. We'll use
Yeah.
that one.
Well, it was after Fight Club came out, so it kind of had that
Yeah,
vibe.
yeah. Okay, so it was Fight
But
Club. Yeah,
the,
it was kind of High meets Fight Club meets me.
right, right. Which and just so you know, Mike, it was really really cool. He shot it on a single chip Sony little DV camera and everything, and
Hmm.
but he did the color correction, he did the lighting, the audio was perfect, and so it got into a lot of festivals, and it was a really really cool film. And
Well,
so
I'll have to see it. Do you still have it?
Oh yeah. It's called Catharsis, and I've got the original SD files.
he does this, and Mike, just so you know, this guy also has all of his emails from 1992 on in some server somewhere because he's that
Same.
kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like doing little short films, and I got a good little reaction from it. So I'm under this impression that okay, the only way you're going to make it in this industry as of 2000, 2001 is if you make a feature film. You make a feature film, you send it out to festivals, it gets into Sundance, Bob Weinstein, and then you become a gajillionaire. And that was my whole idea because Blair Witch had come out at this point,
Hmm.
and like El Mariachi and all these movies, and Clerks, and you see all these people that go from working at terrible jobs to being multimillionaires and getting all these deals. So you're like, well, I can do that too. So what I should have done is I should have written, 100 screenplays first, or done 500 shorts, or done some actual, because basically my training was I shot my own stuff. I had a friend, I did a 14-minute short film, and then I did PA work on a Chuck Norris straight to video movie. So I figured I'm set. Let's go make a feature film. And
I know everything I need to know. Let's do this.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, well, that's the mindset. They're like, if you make something and it has some energy and it's cool, let's go with it. So I was like, so Mike and I had been talking at that point because I think Catharsis had been finished, and I was like, this is really cool. This is what I'm doing. And the cool thing about it is we were still in our late 20s, so nobody told us it was a terrible idea, or that we would spend years editing it and doing visual effects, and everybody would flake out on it. We'd lose our cast. We'd lose everybody that was part of the movie because we didn't know that that was a thing. We just thought, we like this idea. And Mike is such a good technical person, and I'm good at coordinating people, and I've got these awesome, crazy ideas. This is totally going to work. And we're going to have it done in like 6 months, and it's going to be amazing, and everyone's going to love it, and we're going to go to Sundance, and we're going to be gajillionaires. And Mike's going to be able to open his own studio. I'm going to be able to make 14 more, movies of this exact same type, and I'm going to make them more violent and more sexual and more fun, and it's going to be great. And, it took us 7 years to finish it.
It got finished.
It got finished.
That's the important part.
But yeah, but again, we didn't know. I mean, it was just so hard to shoot. And because we could only shoot on weekends, we only had limited access to locations. We couldn't pay anybody. And again, people will cooperate for a while, but after a minute, they don't cooperate anymore because they've got other things to do. I mean,
if you look at the credits of this film, I mean, they're scrolling by for 2-3 minutes. And tell me if I'm wrong, but except for the person who sewed the costumes for the main cast, nobody got paid. So that is a tribute. Either. Oh, okay. So
that's
nobody got
paid. That's my sister.
But that's a tribute to Robbie and his ability to inspire and corral people. I mean, he's the best producer I've ever met.
Thank you.
I mean, seriously, he would throw out an idea, and for some reason, I'm like, that's never gonna fucking happen. And Robbie, the next day, he's like, all right, well, all 50 people agreed to show up, and I'm going, what? How?
That's impressive.
And he's like, really, are you going to be there? And I'm like, well, I guess I am now. Yeah. But the one thing about that movie that really, really bit us. I had gone to film school, and I had a production board, which you pack. That's why you shoot out of order, because you pack all the people that are going to be there the most. You pack them in the beginning, and then you go down to the kind of pickup shots. And day one, weather's great, location's great, people are there, everything's work. We shoot the first scene, and I'm sitting there thinking we're gonna have to do multiple takes, and it happens. We're done, and I'm going, dude, we're gonna be done with this in a week, or maybe a couple
100%.
days. It went downhill from there. After that, you had scheduling, weather, technical issues, everything happened, but it was the worst first shot you could have ever had
on the first day.
Yes,
and that's it.
The first shot was great. The first day was great, and I'm just going, wow, why didn't I do this earlier? So, but I mean, everything was shot, and then we edited it, and then I don't know, life happened, and then finally, I don't know what the deal was. We got reconnected and said, let's finish this, please. But the beauty of, I think, that whole process, I mean, we learned a ton. It was trial by fire. It really got me into video editing. That short film that I did that, and then this got it into there, and I was editing professionally, which was fun. But because when we picked it up, and Robbie is basically the two of us. He would come over for 4 or 5 hours, a couple nights during the week, and we just knock it out.
We eat Taco Bueno that was our caterer.
It was like Taco Bueno, go.
I love Taco Bueno so much.
We needed music, and I didn't want to do it. Um, and so this is where I think you really started getting back into music production because you were the talent. You were
I
the
s-
only talent.
yeah.
But that's where I didn't realize that because before when I knew Robbie and DLB, I didn't know what Robbie did and what Robbie didn't do. Um, but when we're working on this film and saying we need some cues for this, we need music for this, um, I think he was like, "Yeah, I know a guy." And I was like, "Okay," and he'd bring in a CD with MP3s or WAV files on it, and we'd drop them in. And after a while, it was, "Oh, it's you," because you told me it was Jean Claude Dumond or
Jean-Claude Dumont.
okay. And I was just like, I don't know, he's got some French dude working for him. But
So why did you use a different name?
Because I'll tell you, Mike, if you ever want look at a bad movie, the bad movie is typically written, directed, acted, music by, and starring the same terrible person. So I was like, if I could just assign it to somebody else,
I see.
like, and again, that really kind of, I mean, that really divides up your life a little bit because you have, I mean, I've used all kinds of fake names to make music because again, I don't think of myself as that important to the process. Whenever I make a musical project, it's separate from me. Like this is me. I'm Robbie. I'm the guy. I'm the guy that ate tacos with Mike and whatever. But like Robbie, the director, he was super confident and he had everything going for him. Jean-Claude Dumont, the film composer, is like classically trained and super great with all this stuff. All these things that I'm
Sure.
not are these people. Robbie Wabi Sabi is crazy. He's up there playing cowboys. He's ridiculous. He writes silly songs about whatever he wants to. But that's not Robbie. I'm Robbie. I've got two kids that are grown in college. You know, I mean, I'm a normal person, but these other avenues let me do this sort of thing.
You feel kind of like a conduit for the inspirations.
Absolutely. I mean, I like those are all different things. Like if I were to write, I mean, like it's like writing a book with a pseudonym. I mean, it's like you are allowing that character to explore everything that they are, and and like the other day, somebody was trying to send me a link or something like that. I was like, oh, and I gave him my email address. And he's like, oh, I kept looking for Robbie Wabi Sabi. And I'm like, I replied, not a real person. It's just like, I mean,
Yes.
again, I mean, I perform as that and I write songs as that, but like, I'm really this guy. And that way, if a character or a persona doesn't last, then you can do something else and kind of keep your same credentials. I've been doing Robbie Wabi Sabi for 2 years. I'll do it for another 40 years if people still want me to do it. I'm just saying, if I change my mind, it's not my first and last name, you
Right.
know. So I wanted to get into the DGA, so obviously I need to use my real name. But everything else, I mean, I think that Soderbergh edited a bunch of movies with a pseudonym as well, so he wouldn't get in trouble with the editing guild or directors guild by having a fake. And again, I'm not trying to be dishonest about it. I'll tell you about it. What was really funny too was, now I'm skipping forward a little bit, but after we got done with all the music for the movie, I had bought all this gear and basically rebuilt my studio from the ground up because I didn't have anything. I didn't have a computer that did music anymore. I really didn't have any synths. I didn't have any good drum machine. So I had to like rebuy all this stuff and like build it again. And after the movie was over, I was like, well, I got to write some more tunes. What am I going to do?
You need more return on some of this investment. Yeah.
Right. So this goes into a joke that also relates back to our friend Brian, was that, and Tommy Mack. So Tommy Mack was really wanted to be in Duran Duran or Visage or whatever. So when he was in high school, again, this is impressive when you consider it was the 80s. He did a full show with the light show and everything, playing his own songs or playing a couple Duran Duran covers. But like his band on stage, they had the haircuts, they had the jackets, they looked cool. But of course, in every high school, there's always the Rush guys, the metal heads, the blues rock guys. They're like, this is trash. They're just up there pressing buttons. They're just a bunch of button pushing. They said button pushing homos, which again is problematic. But that's what they called them. And I've gotten that throughout the years. I mean, I'm not anti-gay or anything like that, but I'm saying, but like that's what the slang they use for them. And then when we met Brian, because Brian wasn't involved in the programming or the songwriting, he was just there on the stage twisting knobs and looking cool. Because trust me, I have video footage of it. He did look really cool twisting knobs. He would just do this with like this, like with his dead eyes like this. Anyway, but like we called him our techno head. So after I got finished doing the Kung Fu Girls Club music, I was like, I'm going to be in a band. We're going to be called Button Pushing Techno Heads. And we were two Puerto Ricans from New York. And so
Oh my
I
God.
start.
I think I tried to block that out. And now you're making me remember that.
Well, I mean, again, it wasn't. I just wanted the outlet. I mean, I really, because I was starting to edit videos and YouTube was happening at this point. So I started just making little songs with the equipment I had. I didn't have a sampler yet. If I'd had a sampler, it would have been next level. But anyway, but I did a bunch of like library music for podcasts. So a lot of the podcasters would like get my music and they'd be like, who are these guys? I'm like, oh yeah, we're these two Puerto Rican kids from New York. We're Carlos and Mario. And I got this wonderful voice message from these Australian kids who like loved the music. Thank you so much for letting us use your music in our show. We'd love to come see you and Carlos and Mario in New York. It'd be so cool and everything. And I'm like, again, I don't want to break these kids' heart. They're in third grade. And I don't want to tell them that
Not a real person.
not a real person. No, but again,
They don't exist.
again, to me, the kind of person I've been for the last 20 years, so I don't find that interesting. A lot of people do find me interesting, but I'm saying, but like, I don't want to be like, I'm Robbie Ryan. This is my musical statement. Enjoy it. I'm never that precious about it. I mean, like, I'm like, this is fun. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, you have other things to listen to. You're fine. But what's funny though, too, is I look at my Spotify specs and like my number 2 country is Australia now. So maybe those kids grew up and maybe now they like my music and they don't realize it's the same person as Carlos and Mario. But again,
You need Carlos and Mario to do a Robbie Wabasabi remix.
they really should come out of hibernation. Well, because I bought one of those. One of my favorite things is it's the Emu Carnival, which is with the Latin Proteus. You remember that one, Mike?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
got the little confetti.
And it has like samples that say salsa on it and like Carnival. And it's like, and it's always like, and I was trying to pitch this to somebody. I was like, I'm going to buy this Rompler. And they thought all it did was make awful Latin American vocal samples. I'm like, no, actually it has really good percussion on it. So I think that would be Carlos and Mario's weapon of choice in 2023. So you gave me an idea, Mike. It might have to happen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'd have to get those M1 drums out again. And I don't know if I could do that.
But for Kung Fu Girls Club, which I think we kind of passed over that was the film that I was editing with him.
Yes. For
Which
7
was
years.
basically a live action anime. Am I wrong in that sense?
That was the exact intention.
Okay. So the music he was doing, it was this like old school synth pop, punchy, with kind of a 90s punchiness to it. And then any of the ethereal atmospheric stuff he did, it had this cool like Asian flair, which matched the movie. But it was the first time that I really heard, oh, this is music that Robbie was composing. Because when I knew him in DOB, Brian and I were basically 50-50. I'd work on a song and pass it off, and he'd work on a song, pass it off. And sometimes I would do 90% of a song, sometimes he'd do 90% of a song, but it was very partnership oriented. And I assumed it was the same way with them. And then later on, I learned with Robbie that he was like, man, I'm not really involved in that, which was one of his dissatisfactions with that in the end, and why he, rediscovering this was great. So when I learned of what he was capable of doing, I really enjoy his style and his stuff. And I'm like, this is great. So when he's doing all these other side projects, I really like the music. So, I mean, he's got a style. He's true to it. I bet you could have 100 songs laid out there, and one of them was one that he programmed that I could point it out to you. So,
And that's the idea. Everything, Miles Davis once said it takes a whole lifetime to figure out what you sound like, because, whenever you're in a band, when you're in high school, you're trying to be Depeche Mode. I mean, you don't have the life experiences. You don't have your own sound. You just have to build towards that. And I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be Depeche Mode or Human League. I mean, those bands are their own thing, and that's fine. And I respect them and love them, but I don't want people to be like, oh man, if you like X, you're going to like Y, because that's what a lot of my contemporaries are doing. Are you a fan of Yazoo or whatever? Then you're going to like this. I mean, I'm like, they probably like the original stuff, and they may like you, but they should like you for you and not because they like the other things.
Yeah, I do remember I mean, same thing. Like when I was in high school and I got my first little bits of recording equipment, even after high school, I wanted to be Sting. I
Sure.
wanted my stuff to sound like Dire Straits and maybe a little bit of Peter
Paul
Gabriel
Simon.
and Paul Simon. And I just those were my kind of inspiration.
Sure.
And so, who were you listening to, and who do you listen to now?
Now I listen to all kinds of things. But back then it was like really, it was Depeche Mode first, and then Pet Shop Boys really kind of nailed it for me because Pet Shop Boys were really big on the songwriting. And that was their whole thing. Like they were big on the songwriting, and then they would hire a bunch of dudes to come do all the production for them. So their productions were awesome. They were getting like Trevor Horn and like uh Shep Pettibone and all these like Stephen Hague, all these like serious like electronic producers do their music for them. And like I admired that, but it's like what a hard bar to achieve when you're 15 and all you got is a Korg M1. You don't even know what an EQ is or a compressor is and everything. So that's what I always aspire to. And I still like them a lot. I try to listen to new music every week. Like whatever the new hot club song is, I try to reach for that star. I won't ever get there because it'll always come back as me. But I'm like, okay, they're doing this kind of compressed piano. They're doing this kind of bass line, this kind of drum.
Right.
They're doing this kind of like fun percussive thing with the synth. Okay, I like. Okay, they're using this kind of vocoder, putting that kind of effect on it. So I'm kind of like, this is what's popping in the clubs right now, and I try to bring that back into my work. Again, it'll always be me. I'm never going to try to carbon copy any of these records or do a sound alike, which a lot of people do, and it's whatever. I'm all about the songs. I'm all about the structure. I'm all about the feeling of it. And then if people like it, great. If not, I certainly enjoyed making it. And I have an audience now, not a huge audience, but I have an audience, people that dig what I do. So I really want to make music for me, which in the result is music for them.
It sounds like when you listen to music now, you really hear the production and the pieces that
100%.
make up the music that. And I do that too. Like I can hear the individual tracks and I can be like, oh well, this is probably what they did there. And one of the things that freaked me out for the longest time, and we've talked about "You Can Call Me Al" from Paul Simon, but there's a bass break in the middle of it. Like there's a slap
Yes, sir.
bass break. And I was like, how did they get that sound? And then one day I was like, oh, it's reverse. Half of it's forward, and then they cut the tape, and then they played it backwards. That has to be, or maybe they sampled it. I don't know, but it's definitely played forward, and then it's backwards. And
Right.
because of the way that slap bass sounds, it's kind of it's a little bit like, oh, is that really happening? But yeah, those are the sorts of things that you just kind of can hear now, but back then you were like, oh, I don't know why I like it. It's very cool though.
Well, I mean, and I don't know why I like, snare drums that go, or like hi-hats that go, tss, or like, I didn't know what an orchestral hit was. I mean, and then once I found out what it was, I started overusing it, and then I stopped overusing it because it's too much. But I mean, but again, when you're crafting your sound, you're saying, I want to be marketed just like X. And if X is doing this, I better be doing that too. And then you realize after a while that, you weren't going to be a superstar just by copying somebody else. Typically, you're the opposite. You're a wannabe. And I was often like warned about chasing trends, stuff like that, which I don't really do. I have a very specific style, but I really try to make it sound fresh and new because, again, people can hear it. If you press play and they hear the first two bars and it sounds old or it sounds sloppy, they're like they tune out. They're like, this is not a song I want to listen to. You got to hook them at the beginning. So, but yes, I started making music. But what Mike was saying was true. I'm sorry, we're getting off on all kinds of tangents. I apologize.
That's fine.
But like,
That's
That's why we're here.
but when Mike was talking earlier, so he said he and Brian were 50-50 or 80-20 or whatever. I don't think I ever contributed more than 20 or 30% to a Division of Beat song I didn't write 100%. And that was a lot of ego. That was a lot of just the fact that all of our equipment was at this guy's house. So some of the best work you do is first thing in the morning, last thing at night, the middle of the night. So whenever I was available to come, it was usually like early evening or whatever. And I'd go home and then he'd put a new drum track in he would just do whatever you do to make a music. And then he'd be like, well, here it is. And again, I really couldn't say anything because I wasn't getting in there programming it. I didn't know anything about mixing it. So I was like, well, I guess you're the professional here. You know what you're doing. I'll just sit in the back and you read magazines and, whatever. But I learned a lot in that time period. I watched this guy do it. I watched how you do a sequencer. I watched how you edit the song. I watched how you make arrangements and everything. And then once it became my turn 10 years later, I was like, I got this. I know what I'm looking for here. I know what I'm looking for there. I know what sound does this, what sound does that. I know how to get this kind of feeling out of this. I know how if I do a minor chord, it'll do this, a major chord will do that. Because again, I was there for years watching this guy work.
Soaking it up.
Put in the
Yeah,
time.
so
Yeah.
if you listen to Division of Beat music, those are my chord changes, those are my melodies, those are my lyrics, but it was never like a full partnership like what you and Brian had. I'm glad I did it back then because I can imagine if I had to start making music in 2003 or whenever we started doing Cook for Girls Club, I never would have done it. I wouldn't have known where to start. And I talked to a lot of guys that are like crazy music fans like I am, and they're like, yeah, I wanted to get going with X or Y or this. I wanted to get started with Logic or Fruity Loops or whatever, but I didn't know where to start. I got this MIDI controller. What do I do? I mean, like I hear that a lot and everything, and it makes perfect sense because there's so many choices now and it's so overwhelming. But like, I approach everything from the same attitude I did when I was 15, which I'm like, I want this to do that. I want this to do that. I want this to do that, which is why I still have a hardware studio and not a virtual studio. If I wasn't a knucklehead, I'd have a virtual studio. But I like the way everything else feels. Go ahead, Mike.
When you started getting back into this and you did I want to say Jean-Claude Van Damme, the
Jean-Claude Dumont.
Jean-Claude Dumont. Tell me what your gear was then. What were you sequencing on?
Okay, so I had that Korg M1 still. Like I had the Korg M1 from the DOB days, which is the only synth I owned. Everything else we bought together. So they were all at Cleve's house. So I had no other synths that I could mess around with.
And this was your first synth that you bought in high school, right?
Well, it was a Christmas present from my dad.
Okay, but this is the same one that
Same
got
one.
you in that
The same
original
one.
band. Okay.
That's the original band, yeah. So
Do you still have it?
No, I actually sold it, and then
Okay.
I got the rack mount version. I sold that too. So I do miss the piano, but everything else kind of it gives me PTSD for the cheesy stuff I used to do with it. Everything, but it's still a good synth. I'm not going to knock it. So I had that, and I had then Mitchell was selling gear. Remember, he was selling equipment at the time. So I
Did you
got
buy equipment from him?
I bought a microcorg from him. Yeah, the one I still have, I bought from Mitchell.
I don't remember Mitchell owning a microcorg.
Oh no, I
okay.
bought it from the store he worked at.
Oh, yes. Mitchell had the brief foray at, I think it was Brook Mays.
I think it was too.
In Arlington off 360. And
yeah, so I drove down there one day to buy a microcorg at cost from Mitchell. See, our
Nice.
paths are always intertwining. And then I had a little Alesis nano bass, which is like a little cheesy, like 90s rompler that just does bass sounds.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's got like jazz, funk, fretless. I mean, it's like got like 1,000 patches, but they're all pretty usable. Because the problem I was having was the microcorg sounded so cool that I kept using that on bass, and then I wouldn't use it for any of the pads or anything else. So I was like, anyway, I had that, the M1, and I had an R8M drum machine, and that was my drums at the time. So a lot of the sped up percussion or like the really low funky drum stuff, that's all in R8M. And then I went to every music shop in town asking them if they had just a software sequencer. Said, I don't want to do any audio. I just want a software sequencer. They're like, who are you talking to? That doesn't even exist. That's not even a thing. I was like, well, I don't want to do any audio. They're like, what's wrong with you, sir? I mean, like, just really. And then meantime, these guys over here, Brian and Mike, were like, just get Reason, bro. I'm like, but Reason their sound engine wasn't that good back then. And I liked the idea of it. I liked the fact that knobs on it, but I was like, I'm an old man now. I'm 26 years old. I mean, I can't learn this newfangled kids junk software. So, I mean, in reality, I should have done it because it made my life a lot easier, but I still love hardware. So I ended up getting, again, goes back to Cleve. He was working for a computer company, and they were getting rid of a bunch of these legacy Mac desktops from like the 90s.
Nice.
And so I was talking to a friend. He was like, you should get this program called Opcode Vision. And I'm like, And I'm like, what's that? I mean, because I'd heard of it, but it's a really good MIDI sequencer. So I got this program called Easy Vision, and I bought it on eBay or whatever, and I had it going and everything. And then my friend Rusty was working for Digidesign, and he was like, oh, you're using you're using like this Easy Vision and like the 8 tracks or whatever. I was like, this is amazing. I can do whatever. He's like, well, the guy that did all the code for that works in the next desk to me. I told him you were using Easy Vision. He's like, why the fuck is this guy using Easy Vision? He can get Studio Vision for free. So I downloaded that, and Studio Vision has been my guy since 2002.
Nice.
I've sequenced everything on Studio Vision. It's very simple to use. It has unlimited tracks, and it uses a system called OMS, which is still kind of the backbone of a lot of Mac's audio MIDI architecture. But basically, OMS lets you assign as many synths as you want to a patch called a studio, and then in the sequencer, you just pull up the name of the synth, pull up the patch, and a lot of times you'll send sysx over to the patch to change the patch on the synth. So if you have like an MKS50, it already has all the presets loaded up in the library. Anyway, but the bottom line is the interface that I got for $50 to run this sequencer that I got for free on this computer that I also got for free can run 256 channels of independent MIDI at any given time. So in theory, you can have all of your hardware hooked up at the same time, run it off a single sequencer, and you're good to go. And that has been amazing for me. And I've tried GarageBand, I've tried to do MIDI in Logic, I've tried to do MIDI in Pro Tools, and it's just never the same. And I just really like it. So Kung Fu Girls Club was my first thing I did with Studio Vision, and Robbie Wabi Sabi is my last thing. I still use it every single track.
That Studio Vision, are you still running it on that really old Mac, or is it something
100%.
Really? Okay.
It works like a champ because all it's doing is it's sending out MIDI information. It's not sending out any audio. It's not using VSTs. Sure. It's basically like just a giant sequencer that just does sequencing. And then I can sync my main Mac over to Logic, and I can just record everything directly out of so once it's out of Studio Vision, it's an audio, and then I can do whatever I want with it. And I know, and again, this sounds very old manny, and I don't mean for it to, but like once I don't have to mess with it in sequencer form anymore, I'm so much happier. So I'm like, now it's locked in audio. I can edit it. I can do effects. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to fire up the synths until next time I make another song. So right. I know that, but it's like, but again, it's like it wouldn't be the same if I just did everything in Logic, because I know I can.
Right. So in Logic, you're obviously coming from your synthesizers, your and sequencer,
yep.
And you're in the analog world, and then you got an A to D to converter, so some sort of I/O sound card box or mixer. What is that?
SSL 2+.
Oh, okay then. Well then.
So just and it was only $300. I mean, it's not an expensive device at all.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that's, I'm thinking the same thing you're thinking. Yeah. Because growing up, I was like, SSL. Peter Gabriel's got an SSL. So and so has an SSL. Trevor Horn has an SSL. So growing up, I was like, and then even I went to SSL headquarters 7 or 8 years ago, and I saw a desk, and I was showing my daughter they had Hot Time Summer in the City. They had all the stems for it. And she was like, Dad, how much does this cost? And the guy's like, costs as much as a house. This is back when houses cost $100,000. It was like, it was whatever. And I was like, and I was asking the guy, I said, hey, so what if I mix everything on a Mackie 1202 and then port it out to an SSL? He's like, it'll sound like shit, because it is shit. And the SSL doesn't make it sound like any less like shit.
Yeah.
But then I found out that as about probably 3 or 4 years ago, the SSL was coming out with this thing. And I was like, well, it's going to be $4,000. And it's like, it's $300. I'm like, oh my God, because that's basically 2 channels of an SSL mixer that I have at my disposal now. Again, I can't ever run anything simultaneously into it, but I can certainly run all my individual tracks into it. And they're all fully analog until that last second. after they go through the analog circuits in that, and then they're digital. So all my kicks are booming, all my snares are snappy,
Yeah.
and maybe that's just me saying that, but I can tell a noticeable difference between
No,
what I
that
used to.
your production, you have a sound, and now I know why. No, it comes through. I honestly didn't know what you were sequencing on. I didn't know that you were 100% hardware, where Mitchell now is 100% in the box,
100%.
and
So
I'm kind of half and half.
your Logic, and are you doing some sort of MIDI clock to your old Mac?
100%.
Okay,
100%.
that's how you
Yeah,
synchronize it.
yeah,
Okay,
100%.
so you bring in each synth into its own track, and you just kind of relay it. You basically overdub. Okay,
Right. And so like the last song I did has 32 tracks, which seems luxurious to me. And don't say anything, Mike. Don't say anything, other Mike. There's 4 cowbell tracks on my new track that I'm working on right now.
there's
But
nothing wrong
also,
with that. There's nothing wrong with
but,
it.
because in the past I used to have to put all my drums in one audio track or all my percussion in one audio track, because now I can just have them on separate tracks because I have Logic, which is much better than the version of Pro Tools I was using. So
No,
now I hated Logic as a MIDI sequencer, but I love it as an audio editor.
Have you now? I've heard you talk about a lot. Sorry, I'll
go for it.
interrupting, but I've heard you talk about a bunch of DAWs, but I haven't heard you talk about Cubase. Have you ever used Cubase as a MIDI sequencer?
So Cakewalk was my first sequencer, and
Mhm.
that was pretty much anything I wrote in high school was on Cakewalk.
Right.
And then in 1991, the computer I had for that was part of my dad's office. He got fired from that job. That computer went away, so I no longer had that computer as a MIDI sequencer, which is fine. This is back when computers cost like $3,000 for a 486. So I didn't have that computer. Cleve had a computer, but he was sequencing on his S50. There was a version of like the MC202 software that ran on the S50. So he had, and the S50 had a little monitor out, so he could actually see it and edit it graphically from the sampler on the screen, which is really cool.
Mhm.
But you had a restrictive note count, so your songs could never be that crazy, and you couldn't really go crazy with chords or arpeggios or have whatever. But what was really cool was that was good for him because that meant that his arrangements were really tight.
Right.
And when we migrated from that shitty little sequencer to Cubase, he lost a lot of that throttling. So he started going crazy with arpeggios, like 50 layers of pads on every single song. And again, that's where you lost the bottom end. That's where you lost the drums. I mean, that's where you lost everything. And it's just the songs just lost all the energy because it wasn't there anymore. Because you have a lot of instruments doesn't mean you should use all of them, kids.
It's like when George Lucas, did episode 1, 2, and 3. You're just surrounded by yes men, you see,
100%.
and nobody to tell you no. So
Right.
that's when you start making the crap.
I said no, but he wasn't listening.
Mike and I have had several discussions about the perils of George Lucas and that kind of stuff.
75% are pretty good.
Yeah. But again, other Mike, whenever you're 17, 19 years old and this guy has a studio at his house, this guy has a sequencer, he has all the equipment, you really can't shoot down a lot of his things because he's the guy in charge and everybody's telling him he's the guy. And I can't sit there and say, well, it'd be really cool if you had this, maybe an analog synth line there. Oh, Robbie, I don't want to sound all dark. I don't want to sound too house. Like every time I'd be like, hey, let's do this, let's go. It's the same thing with me now. I add more cowbells, but I have the taste enough to know when too many cowbells are too many cowbells.
Right.
I'm not saying, because I've listened to
4
millions of
layers,
hours.
okay. 5 layers, too much.
Right. But again, when these cowbell tracks, they're all individual. They're all in different parts of the thing. At one point, you put a phaser on one. At one point, you put a little bit crusher on there. You mix it up to keep the ear candy going. But I'm saying, I think I know enough about arrangement now to where I would concentrate on the bass and the kick. If that's working, then build up slowly from there. But don't add a bunch of stuff just because you think it needs it when it doesn't. I actually end up removing more things from tracks than I add to them.
Yeah, that was the biggest edit thing in film class was, and it applies to songs totally, or any creative endeavor.
Get in as fast as you can, get out as fast as you can.
Well, don't be afraid to cut your favorite part if it doesn't work
100%.
with the rest of it. And we had a search track which I didn't listen to that, and I didn't want to cut it because it was the part that inspired the song.
Right.
But staying there ruined the song.
Right.
And if I would cut that now, then the song would be good. But yeah, if it's not helping the story, and it's confusing and this and that, no matter how much it is on its own, get rid of it. But I think that's the art of editing is not what to keep, it's what to get rid of.
But imagine how different your first album would have been. Because I mean, I listened to your album, the So Far album. Imagine what if you'd had all that equipment and unlimited time to tweak it and do whatever you wanted to do with it.
They'll be messing around with it.
Well, so you're perfectly happy with it the way it was when it came out.
No. I actually have. I had this discussion with Mike. I have those Tascam 16. They're half-inch reel to reels from Dub One, and I'm gonna get those baked and transferred somewhere because I want to remix. I want to not do remixes, but I want to remix that album because it was mixed so shittily, in my opinion.
I've heard it on studio monitors. It sounds fine. In your car, it doesn't sound that great. But I mean, I played it on a nice set of studio monitors. I'm like, I could hear everything. I could hear all the mids. I could hear everything going on that record. But I'm saying, I'm assuming all the effects and the EQ are printed on these tapes, right?
I don't know. That's a good question because they may have not been.
Probably not.
Because I think after that we were doing them in session 8, but then you know what? It's probably a little bit of everything because we use the session 8, but you know how it is. We're doing stuff and we're having polyphony issues, so we gotta keep. Hey, just solo the JD990 right now, and then we ran out of the session 8. We started going to the Tascam, and that's why. So you're probably right. Where the effects are probably recorded on it.
Yeah. Well, I remember one of the things we did back then was we would, in order to save production costs, we would have the backing tracks on a DAT, and then we'd go to that same guy, Steve, and then we'd do the vocals over it when we had decent mics and decent EQs and compressor and everything like that. So you have this really decent sounding vocal over this really shitty home recorded backing track. And it's like, now, of course, I have the technology and the wherewithal. That would never happen again. But back then, that's all we had.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. We had the same. We had 16 tracks of ADAT, but we wanted to use every
single
single
track. Nightmare right there. ADAT, forget it. It's like
I loved them. I mean, they had their downsides, but you got the 16 tracks going, but you use all of them. And so what do you mix down to? Well, you can go buy another ADAT, and well, we don't have that kind of money.
Yeah. Or
you can go to a DAT. Well, we didn't have that kind of money. Well, what do we have? Well, we got a cassette tape or a mini disc. Mini disc it is. Sure. And so that's you use what you got.
And I've heard that mini disc has its own like little compression vibe where people use it as a serious like flavor giver or something like that to add the tracks or whatever.
Yeah, if you want to knock something down. I don't know what they did if they compressed because what the mini disc was.
It's not MP3, but it was a little better than MP3, but it is compressed.
Yeah, like they took the highs and the lows and did compression and cut it out. And the theory was, well, you're not going to hear those anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
all hearing is not the same, and the end result is clearly different.
It's like Mike used to before the iPod came out. Mike would burn these CDs of our favorite albums, and they would be like the highest fidelity MP3. And then so remember those little Rio shitty little MP3 players. I'd put some of Mike's MP3s in there, and I'd have 4 songs on there, and I'd be like, I'm ready to go. I can go on a 12-minute walk thanks to Mike. Because they're all like...
Yeah, I refuse. They're like, dude, do it at 32. And I'm like, what? No. All the stuff was like 256, 768. Yeah. It was crazy.
Well, even to this day, if I have a choice on my iPhone, I'll 44.1 16-bit, stereo CD quality wave, that is And
Minimum.
oh, I can only have so many songs. I mean, you've got bigger iPhones now, and so you can have more of those. But yeah, my old iPods were full. You have 4 songs, you're full.
So you talked about your sequencer, but what is it if you're all hardware and no virtual anythings? What was the last keyboard you bought?
I'm out of space, Mike. It's pathetic how little space I have in my synth room. And I'll tell you how bad it is. So I have a computer running Logic and a computer running Studio Vision, right? In order to get from the computer that's doing Logic to the computer doing Studio Vision, I have to walk through my bathroom, through my kitchen, through my living room, to the other side of the bedroom because I can't get over the bed because there's gear everywhere. So,
I love it.
it's okay. So I'll give you a breakdown of everything I have because again, this is the nice thing about having all hardware is that no one's going to have your exact same setup. Whereas if you open a session in Logic or Ableton and you pick the stock sounds that are in there, a billion other people have those same stock sounds. So what's going to keep, obviously your ideas are original, but what's going to keep your record from not sounding like that dude's record? And don't get me started about loops. If you start using other people's loops, there's a million other guys using those same loops, and you don't want to do that. So,
Yeah, we all know how we felt when we hear a song and we recognize a loop.
or recognize the preset or
Yeah.
the sample or whatever. Anyway, so I'm going to give you kind of a Reader's Digest version of my whole studio. But the last thing I bought was a Vermona DRM Mark III, which is an all analog drum module from Germany, made in Eastern Germany. It's silver and metal, and it basically has 16 different drum sounds on there, from kick to other kick to snare to hi-hat to other kind of hi-hat to zap to percussion to whatever. And all the sounds are great. All the sounds are crispy and perfect, and it's got individual outputs on the front for each individual track.
Nice.
Because that's, which is awesome, because if it's on a rack, you can't get to the, and my system, I have to put a patch cable in for every single audio track. So on this track I'm working on now, I had a sound, and the drum machine and the synth I was using are too close together on the rack. So I had to, just to get the audio feed from this synth, I had to get my electric screwdriver and unscrew it out of the rack, put the cable in, record the synth patch, and then screw it back in. That's how connected I am to these instruments. But yeah, so it's super awesome. Great clap sound. Great. I mean, the snare sound is really snappy and awesome. And I haven't even put it through the SSL yet. So I mean, I don't even know how it's going to be great. I've got that. So I'll give you kind of a lot of stuff I had whenever I was working with you, but I'll kind of give you boys both a rundown, because I have some really good synths and some really shitty synths, which means no one will ever emulate my synth setup. So I've got one of those Oberheim OB6s. I bought that a couple years ago.
Nice.
Super great. Always wanted it. Again, you wait long enough, and these prices either skyrocket or they go down a little bit. I like to wait till they go down a little bit before they become collector's items and skyrocket again. So I have the OB6. I also have the little Dave Smith Pioneer synth. Are you familiar with that? The Torres?
Nope.
So it's this little synth that Dave Smith from Sequential, he wrote the code for, and he designed this synth, and then Pioneer built it. So it's built like a tank, and it's like
Nice.
it's got an actual legit power supply, not a wall wart, and the sounds are cool, and I got it for like $500, and it's like, I'm just so excited I can buy an analog synth the size of a textbook. And then you got Korg over here and Teenage Engineering, like, we can make analog synths the size of a credit card. I get that, but I'm saying, but like, I'm just, so I have that. I have a little Jomox bass drum machine. So it just makes, it's basically a 909 clone, but we use it on Kung Fu Girls Club. That's where you get all those really big bouncy analog drums the bass drums. It's perfect. It does one thing great. I've also got a Dave Smith Mofo, which I've had for about 20 years, which is like just a great little one voice of the Prophet 08. And then I've got one of the Arturia. I've got the Mini Brute, which I like a lot. I got the special edition of that. What I do with that guy is I'll come up with a patch on it, and then I'll just sample it. And then now I have a synth patch I can endlessly recall, put all kinds of effects on. I don't have to worry about losing the patch or whatever. And I also have a little, there's a guy in in Austin named Delptronics. His name is Mickey Delp. He voiced the original Arturia drum brute. And then I was talking to him one day, and he's like, "You like cowbell?" I'm like, "I actually love cowbell, Mickey." He's like, "Well, I've got a little analog cowbell modulator I'll sell you for $70, and that's all it does. It makes analog cowbell sounds." I'm like, "Sold."
Done.
So I've got that. Um, I've got a Waldorf Rocket, which I was really excited about because it has an analog filter, but it's a digital oscillator. And what's cool about the Rocket is you can make whatever sound you want. It has no patch memory, but you press a button on it, it sends a sysx to your sequencer. So whenever the song starts, it just goes to that patch. So you never have to worry about the patch again because it's in your song. So whenever the song starts, boom, it resets to
that's
the patch.
great.
It's so cool. And you're like, that's amazing. I've got the little Arturia Micro Freak, which is an amazing synth because it's also digital, also an analog filter. But
I just bought one of those. It's supposed to show up Wednesday.
it's amazing. I mean,
That's great.
the thing is, it's 4 or 5 years old now. They keep updating it every day. There's a new that's awesome for that synth. But yeah, I
But
hope
you know, they just updated the firmware with the vocoder stuff.
100%.
And I'm
I mean-
going, okay, so no, mine's supposed to show up with the little gooseneck, and I'm going, okay, I need a new toy. So
It's-
I didn't mean
it's-
to encroach on your
No.
unique synth territory.
No, but I'm really into modules. I'm really into modules and rack mounted stuff. I don't like having a bunch of keyboards around. I know a lot of guys who are like, absolutely will only buy the keyboard version of a synth. I'm like, that doesn't work for my setup though. In fact, with the
Who's got that kind of real estate?
my friend Brandon does. He's my friend Brandon. I'm going to go to a show. I'm hosting. Well, I can
Just
give you
kidding.
his
I don't
name.
know him.
No, but next time you're in Dallas, Mike, come to Brandon's house. You'll love it.
All right.
He's got
Candyland.
808s. He's got 808s, 909s, original Prophet 5s, original JP8s.
Wait, was this the guy that was programming the Atari cartridges?
That's Paul.
Okay.
And Paul's still doing that in California. But anyway, so for the Micro Freak, there's actually a kit out there that lets you remove the keyboard and just make it a little tabletop unit. So I did that. So
Nice.
you got to come see the room, man. Got to come see the room.
I want to see it. Shoot.
So yeah, the Micro Freak's really cool. And I told you about the Rocket. I also have the little Moog Siren. It's like a version of the Minotaur, but they tweaked it. All the overlay graphics are orange and blue and yellow and bright colors. So I was like, that's mine. So I bought that as soon as I possibly could. And what's funny is my friend Brandon couldn't get one. And I was kind of like, every time I buy a synth, I always tell him about it. He was very disappointed in my buying the Rocket, but I'm like, I used the Rocket on my biggest hit song, so it wasn't a bad investment at all. So another synth I have is the Roland SH32, which is a virtual synth, which is really cheesy looking, but it looks like an old synth. I use that for some of my songs. Really cool. I also have a Roland D2, which I bought because it was orange. And Mike, this is a whole thing that goes deep into my color fascination, but it's a piece of crap, but I love it. But it's bright orange. I've got a little Akai XR20 drum machine. Haven't used it that much. It's got a bunch of like hip hop samples on it. I've got the Electron Model Cycles FM drum machine, which is cool. I haven't really gotten deep into that guy because it's got its own little thing, but I'm going to use it, I promise. I've got the Korg ER1, which is my first analog drum machine. It's fun. Don't use it as much as I should. I live for this stuff, guys. Oh, by the way, you'll see this in my studio. All the furniture is orange or blue or pink. So I've also got a Yamaha FB01, which I only got because of the bass sound, the DX7 lazy bass sound on there. Love that bass sound. Okay, then going down the rack, we have the aforementioned Emu Carnival Latin percussion module. Love that. And then below that, we have a Cobalt. It's a Modal Cobalt virtual synth, which has. So you're asking about how I get my like VA sounds and my virtual sounds. This is basically a virtual synth in a box, as are most DSP based synths. Love this guy. Only got the surface of it. Going down, I have a Microwave XT, from
Nice.
Waldorf, which is again a bucket list synth item. Again, I waited till the price went down a little bit because those are hard to get now. So I got one of those, and of course, it's all the surface of it is all orange and light blue now. So it was just orange, but now it's orange and light blue. You'll see in the video. Um, and then below that is an Arturia Origin, which I think I told you about before. It's Arturia's first ever synth. It's a big white synth that's got a little screen on it and a bunch of knobs. And basically, it's a virtual modular. So basically, in the synth, you can take a mini Moog oscillator, add a CS80 filter, and then put an ARP 2600, whatever you want. And it's got all these different waveforms, all these things you can do. And you can basically build a massive synth patch of whatever you want. It obviously does all the classic synth patches you want, but you can really go crazy and make all kinds of wild stuff. They don't make it anymore. There are only a few thousand, I think, ever available, and I have one of them, which is awesome. And then below that is my most important item, which I think a lot of people find very controversial. It's an Akai S6000 sampler from 1998, the last of the great Akais, the last of the great beige Akais. And I've got it maxed out on memory, so I can do 3.5 minutes of mono, which is incredible.
Wow.
Well, which for me is a whole
Is
track.
Is that 3.5 minutes of mono at what sampling rate?
16-bit, 44.1.
44.1. Okay, but
Yeah.
you can change the rate to get like if you
100%.
want to get real crunchy and stuff. Yeah,
Right. But I mean,
Okay.
but like that covers me. That's for me.
that's a lot.
That's an entire vocal track. That's any kind of incidental, haze and yaz. That's any drums I want in there.
And does it have like some sort of SCSI drive or something that
It sure does.
Okay.
I can add a SCSI zip drive.
Sure does.
No, I mean I can also add basically like a SCSI like SD card, and I can put a gajillion samples on that too. So it really is great. And plus, it's the one that has the removable face. You can edit your samples in your lap versus on a screen, which awesome. And I used to have an Akai S900, which I liked, but I wouldn't know how to work it now. I'm so used to this system. So, but I use samplers in every single song, and I use it for every possible thing. As I mentioned before, I use it for like analog synths. I sample those. I do vocal samples in it. I can do anything. It's got filters in it, so I can MIDI sequence filters from the sequencer. I know I'm going on and on. Up top, I've got a EMU Performance piano module, which is cool because I basically, and I don't think I told you this, Mike, but I told other Mike this. Every single song I write is all the chords, all the bass, all the melodies are all figured out on piano first. I have all the lyrics, all the arrangement pretty much down because I'm a Paul Simon, I'm a John Denver, I'm a Daryl Hall, I'm a classic songwriter.
You're a
I'm
songwriter first, yeah.
I'm a folk singer, and then I get the chords figured out, and then everything is based. First comes the lyric, then comes the melody, then comes the chords, then comes the bass, then comes everything else. So basically, the whole song is figured out before I put a single drum loop in it or a single sequencer, and then the magic happens. So I always think the song is going to be a certain way, and it never is because I let loose, and it's fun as opposed to building the song while you're writing it. I write the song, then I build it. So, and I think if you have that firm foundation of a good song, you're not going to be stuck in that 8-bar loop problem and everything. It's like, this song isn't going anywhere. I'm like, this song was already a song before I even walked in the studio. And
well, it's not much different from making a movie. You got to have a good screen play first,
right.
And then you can build on top of that.
And Mike Nimitz, just so you know, I probably should have written 100 screenplays before you let me film that last one, but it's okay.
Just hearing you say that makes me proud.
Does that movie exist somewhere? Like,
it's on YouTube. It's on YouTube.
Oh.
It's been viewed like 40,000 times.
And we are going to point to it.
Is it still cut up, or is it all as one?
No, I there's actually two versions. I did a full version and a full version with audio commentary.
Oh, okay.
Where I'm literally just watching the movie like I'm doing right now, talking to you and just talking about it. So
cool.
It's a B movie, okay? I like the music because, Robbie did it, but if you watch it and you see all the people and look at the credits and say the budget for this was zero, it's a little more impressive, or a lot more impressive. But also, some of the people in there actually have some really good credits in IMDb right now.
So what he's saying, Mike, is that the guy that did all my stunt coordination and played my main like action villain used Kung Fu Girls Club as to show James Cameron, and he got an Avatar.
Cool.
And then he got to be stunt coordinator for Star Trek, and then he was Spider-Man in all the Spider-Man sequels, and it was an Iron Man 3. But
that's pretty awesome.
It was our movie that we made that was his demo reel, basically.
Because he got to,
great.
Robbie would be like, the script would say like, these two fight, and they're looking at me, and I'm like, I don't know, you guys figure it out. And so the guys that were actually doing the fighting, they were the stunt coordinators, and they did it, and
they were
it
amazing.
was greatness.
That's awesome.
But then I think there was a couple other people in there who went on to do acting, and some of the girls.
Yeah, some of the girls did like more like kind of straight to video stuff and everything. Some girls did like TV movies. Something like a lot of people went on to do good stuff. It's just it's a rough world out there, even if you're beautiful and talented. I mean, so it's just like things. I mean, I think most people went and did other work. One of the main stunt guys, he's directing movies now, and he was on a couple episodes of what's it called? Reservation Dogs. He was on a bunch of those episodes and everything. So, again, these guys are still working. I mean, it's just not just because you're in a couple things doesn't mean you're going to be a top tier name ever. But we had some really good talented people on it. And Mike, if we're looking at this in the future and we have a time machine, we need to go back and just ADR that entire film. We need to loop every line of dialogue.
Well, we have the technology. We could do it right now.
100%.
Back then, the only thing that you could do that with was Pro Tools at the time,
right,
because it had I don't know what the name of the tool was, where you could kind of compress and stretch a recording specifically they had an ADR function for that, so they wouldn't have to match it 100%. You could tweak syllables and squish it around. But I remember learning that, and we were going, oh my gosh, because one of the technical challenges on that was clearly sound, lavs, every mic on earth. It was the best film school ever.
100%.
The result is not indicative of the knowledge gained.
Right.
So it was fun times.
I can't wait to see it.
Well, it's definitely a special film, and there's a lot of outtakes in there, and there's lots of. But if you listen to the commentary, there's a part where I just talk about the time that, like, Mike is like the size of a 8th grader, more or less, and at one point we were at a location that was a really cool location. It was like this Japanese garden kind of thing, and we were trying to get this shot, and he's like, "I wish I had a crane." I'm like, well, you can get on my shoulders, Mike. and so Mike's actually shooting the thing from my shoulders, and we got the shot. And there's a behind the scenes picture somewhere, I'll have to find it, where I'm standing there looking on, and Mike's on my shoulders with a camcorder. And it's like, yeah. But we didn't know that location sound was crap. We thought that, but again, if we were to do this now, we would scrap, because a lot of things I was trying to do with the score was to hide all the background noise in the audio track. And again, it wasn't Mike's fault. It wasn't anybody's fault. Some days we were able to use a boom mic. Some days we had to use a shitty little $30 camcorder mic. That's all we had. We didn't have anything else. We also didn't know what we were doing, but whatever. But again, if we were to do it again, we would not even worry about the audio. We would just use it as a guide track and get all the actors in and just redub everything. But all the actors just scattered once we finished, and it was like, and we didn't know what we were doing, so that happened. Yeah, so that's pretty much my whole rig. So I hope I didn't disappoint you, or it's a lot to talk about.
When you do vocals, what are you recording those on?
Same thing, the SSL into Logic.
Okay. What you just go straight into the SSL? You don't have like a mic preamp?
No, I just use whatever's in the SSL.
And then the microphone that you're recording through, is it fancy, or is it's an
ADK, so it's like a $400 or $500 mic and everything. So I mean,
Cool.
it seems to work for me. I mean, I'm not Barbara Streisand. I mean, but it's like I'd love a U47 if you got a couple extra of those. I'll take one of those. But I mean,
Sure.
but I mean,
Well,
but
if you find one, I want
yeah,
one too.
well, I actually, honestly, like I started looking for one because I was like, well, I heard these are good bikes. I should probably pick one up. And I'm like, and they're not on Craigslist for some reason. I don't know what the deal is. So yeah, but yeah,
So
no, go ahead.
I will tell you. So I've listened to the Neumann U87s, a lot of different ones, and I've heard one or two U47s,
Okay,
if you can find them. And yeah, they all sound amazing,
right.
but it's really close. But like this thing that I'm talking through right now is a TLM 103,
Uh-huh.
and it's like the little brother, and they've been around for a while. And I'm not going to say they're bulletproof because you still got to be careful with them. But man, they sound real close.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, but
And they're
I
not $9,000. They're like $1,000.
$1,000 is doable for a mic. I mean, I think so. But yeah, I really that's another thing that I'm really just now learning about because I mean, it's like back in the day, you're like, here's your mic. What is it? An SM57. Great. You know,
And
just
those are great. An SM58, actually, I will tell you, an SM58 is if you could have one mic to start a studio with, do it with that one.
I've
Don't get a
got two.
knockoff.
I've got two.
They're bulletproof.
Don't get a knockoff. Get the 58. Don't get an Audio Technica. Don't get anything else. Get a real
Sure,
Shure 58.
SM58. Yeah, if you, and most of the ones that I've seen, let's call it the screen is just
Yes.
dented to hell
Yes.
because it can take it
Yeah.
They still work.
and
Yeah,
it's been around.
Well, you can use them as a hammer and they will still work.
100%.
Yeah, they're great. The little ice cream cone mic, we had one in our gig bag for sound tests and everything else. And we had a XLR plug that had a quarter inch. It was like a converter, so you could just
Yeah.
plug it into the board and do a test.
I think our first stage mic had a switch on it. Like
Mhm.
that's how ghetto it
Click,
was.
click. Mhm.
Worst.
Why isn't it
So-
working? Oh, I forgot to turn it on.
On one of the tracks that I listened to, there was female vocals. Who was that?
Which one? Hallelujah.
I don't know. It was one on Spotify. Was it Youth?
Youth. Yeah, that's Piper, my daughter.
Okay. I was thinking that may have been her, but I wasn't sure.
So fun fact, I wrote Youth to do with Red Flag in 1995. And then I wrote it to be part of Kung Fu Girls Club 2. And then that never happened. So I was like, I don't know about you guys, but the Pando was wonderful for me creatively. Like I was able to make this project happen and learn how to use, Pro Tools and learn how to make my own music where I hadn't really had a chance to do that before. And I really got a chance to do it. So I'm grateful to that downtime for that. But yeah,
Did you just say the pandemic as the panda?
the Pando.
Oh, the Pando. Okay.
Or we call it the vid, the Pando. It's a shared experience that everybody has, that everybody's alive today that was alive 4 years ago. We all have that. So it's just, we just call it the Pando, the vid. It was a really scary, weird time. But but again, I never would be talking to you guys if I hadn't done that, because I wouldn't have had this awesome new project that I can just build on now because I've already started it.
I will say I've always been an indoor kid, and the pandemic was not a terrible thing for me to go through.
No. I mean, it was scary for me because all of my jobs are public facing, so it was kind of scary for that. But I mean, I was paying really cheap rent. I didn't have a lot of expenses, so it was fine. But again, it was scary for a lot of people.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it was.
Didn't change my life one bit. I went to work every freaking day. The only benefit I got out of it was, wow, because I was living in San Marcos and I was like, I can drive to Austin in 30 minutes. This is the way it should
100%.
be
no, it's
Yeah.
wild.
instead of an hour and stuff.
mean-
And so yeah. Anyways,
I mean, it was wild to be able to go get a pizza 3 towns away in 12 minutes, and then in rush hour, because again,
Right.
nobody was working. I mean, again, it was. I don't mean to minimize the difficulty and all the tests that we had and everything. But I'm saying, but for me, it was a blessing because I got the chance. I wasn't ever bored. I was like, okay, cool. This is how I do drum sounds. This is how I do this. I had just gotten the SSL, for example, and I was like, and you do an 80 comparison to, because what I used to do, and again, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I used to basically record everything from the 1202 to 2-track, and that was it. Not really any EQ. No, I mean, like the effects were printed, and you look back at it, it's like it sounded fine at the time, but back then it's like now I would never do that. But I'm saying,
Right.
but I got to learn, and that's why I get to talk to you guys now about making music, because that's what I do now, and it's amazing.
So
It's a pretty cool thing to do.
describe the SSL.
So
When you talk about that, and I'm thinking SSL, I'm thinking like this huge board.
it is the size of any audio interface. It's basically a rectangle little box. It's got 2 inputs on it. On the back, it's got the little adapter where you can either put a 1/4 inch or XLR in. It's got little meters on there.
Okay, so it's like some Motu type thing.
100%, but it's SSL.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had like this SSL Origin, like the console in my head, and I'm like, where are you picking this up for $300?
Yeah, it's the same company.
Okay,
They got into the business that everybody else did. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Does
again,
does it have any other knob? Does it have any like EQ that you can add to it going into it, or is it just gain and
it has gain. It has basically level control and everything, and you can and it has the little meters, so you can see on the if you're red hot,
flipping?
you can see on the levels and everything. But yeah, no, so it basically is what I was saying to Mike earlier. Mike, it's like basically one channel of an Origin console where you're getting that SSL crunch on the way in, and then you go from there. But it's so funny whenever, because you spend so much time with the music before it goes in there, and then once it goes in there, and then you can adjust everything in Logic. It's just like, oh my God, this record sounds so much better just because of that simple addition. Where in the past, what came out of the mixer with all the distortion and the pots and all this stuff and everything, that's what you were getting on the record. And
Right.
now it doesn't matter how I can use 10 shitty mixers in the production process. Once it gets recorded, none of that matters anymore. You have to deal with ground noise on each synth, and that's a whole different story. But
Got
Cool.
it. And it says a USB interface?
100%.
Okay. Is it this?
Yeah, it's that.
Yeah.
Okay.
They also make one that doesn't have MIDI on it, which was not going to work for me because I need the sync. And now they make one that has like 6 inputs on it. So if you're recording like a live band, you can do that as well. Again, don't need that because I'm just doing the synths and the vocals and everything. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. But what you were thinking is correct, Mike. I mean, up until 5 years ago, buying an SSL was a significant investment. Even like a 6-channel mixer was $3,000 or $4,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a huge up for me. But that's the Shep Pettibone mixer though. So your 505 snares sound like Bizarre Love Triangle, which is what you want when you're making this kind of music. So
What's your controller? You have a keyboard that has no sounds?
yep, I have a couple of them. I have an Arturia little micro, like the little USB little 25 key guy and stuff like that. It's T-Step 25 is what it is. I have one of those for the studio, one of those for the stage. And then because they have the DIN MIDI outs on them. A lot of their controllers only have USB out, so I have to have the DIN MIDI on everything, or I can't use it with my sequencer.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Well, I think we're good.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like we have to have you back and talk some more.
I'd love to.
Yeah. What's next for you, Robbie?
So I'm going into my slow season of work, so I'm going to hopefully get about 3 or 4 more songs done, recorded, and released in the next couple months. And then I'm going to start doing shows again in February.
Excellent.
So yeah. So really now the main idea is to get the catalog bigger and bigger. So that leads to more Spotify plays, and that leads to more longer shows. And if people know your music, it's better. But people are getting to know the stuff now. I've got little kids coming up and singing White Claw Girl at the shows now, which is really cool. But again, it's just you keep on chugging, and then people like it, and they let you know, and it's cool, and it's like it's the greatest thing I could ever do with my life. And and I still have, I've had a family, I've had a life, but it's like I get to do music now, which is really fun, which is kind of always what I wanted to do. As I think I've expressed this, these are the records I've always wanted to make, but I didn't have the political power or the equipment to do it. Now I have all the above. No one can tell me not to jump up on stage and act silly because it's not their band anymore. It's my band. So yeah, whatever.
Hell yeah.
There you go.
I really appreciate the time, guys. You are really amazing and very knowledgeable, and I love your whole vibe, and I love the whole format and everything. And I want you guys to do a million more of these. I think it's really cool. But I'll be happy to come back in a few months or 6 months or whatever. We can talk some more after I get more in the trenches.
Well, thanks again for being on the show. We really, really enjoyed it.
I appreciate your time and making this happen.
Nice meeting you, Mike. No, you guys are amazing. Thank you guys for being so cool about it, and blessings to all your families. It's really nice meeting you, Mike. Have a great night, guys.
It was
Thank you
nice
so much for
Thank
your
you.
time. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Thanks.
Mike's on my